Hey, hello. I am here a little early, so I'm gonna give people some time to trickle in. I think I set the time for about 3:30, but some things ended a little early. So, well, I guess technically I'm 20 minutes late to the original time, but who really cares about that? Not me. So I will give people some time to scoot on in while I start some things. Let's see. I've got coffee. Ooh, there I am. Oh, I forgot I got this cool mask last time. Sweet. And I also have these iron bars, I think because I want to upgrade. Is it the axe? Yes, it's the axe. We just need some cashola for it. Okay. Uh, so, obviously, today we'll talk about Dynamite that happened this past week, along with Collision that happened last night. And I was going to go live yesterday, but then I figured it would make more sense to go live today so that I could cover both Dynamite and Collision because a lot happened on both shows. Honestly, I probably won't go through match by match again today just because there are some storylines that are taking off a lot more than others, and I have just some thoughts that I want to focus on in terms of, who's doing what, when, where, why, and with who. But, that being said, I probably won't start that until about 3:30. So we'll just chat right now. Oh, my little cat bonks. Yeah, okay, no one's come by to ask me if I want to do anything with that cave. A little rude if you ask me, but fine. What do I really, so the goal today is to upgrade the axe so that we can get into the forest. And I know I said last time that I was going to do a little more gaming so that we could pick up here with me being able to enter that area of the forest. Unfortunately, I didn't find any time this past week to do that because, as everyone knows, I've literally been just chatting nonstop about the fact that I started a new job. Was way busy, and then by the time I would get home I was just exhausted, so I didn't really find time to do anything on that front in terms of being able to game outside of work. However, this upcoming week I should have a better handle of things. I'm hoping I'll be able to stream before next weekend, but I'm not going to promise anything. I don't really know. The fact that I was able to actually plan today is sort of a miracle, and it's just because I knew that I wasn't going to have a whole ton to do. But that being said, today we will get this iron axe, and we will enter that little forest area. So, not a ton to update about. Just literally been so busy with new job and everything and planning out some future videos. I think I talked last time about doing a Your Friend Explains series, and I have the script written up for the first one. I just have to get filming equipment in order and actually get up the time to go ahead and film that, which I probably won't have time until mid to later this upcoming week. But that will hopefully be able to be filmed all in one go. And then I don't know when that video would come up, but it is a Your Friend Explains Eddie Kingston, where I'm going to go into detail about Eddie Kingston's career and sort of how he got here for anyone who is new to wrestling or has taken a break and sort of wants to get caught up on things going on in the wrestling sphere. So, all right, let's get rid of that sap. I am collecting these fish not to sell but to eat so that we can go into here and make some real money with the gems that we'll find. But yeah, just basically been busy, new job, everything, sort of making my way through learning some corporate stuff. I've never really been in the corporate world before. Like, technically, I had a corporate job before this, but it wasn't really a corporate job. It was a corporate job in that I sat at a desk, right, and had to sometimes talk to clients, but not really. So this is the first time that I'm really doing anything like this, and luckily everyone seems willing to train me, so we shall see. But just sort of dealing with stuff like that, just kind of going through life. Also was thinking about doing a video series on, like, people do like the day in my life. I was gonna do like a day in my life as like an average, 28-year-old in, a metropolitan area. Not totally sure if I'm gonna do that yet. I don't know if I'm interesting enough, but the idea was just to do something like, hey, here's a day in the life of someone who is like completely average and not like a crazy YouTube person who's going to make you feel like you're super behind in life because they, do X, Y, and Z, whatever. But I haven't planned that one out as much as the Your Friend Explains series, which I am going to make a couple more scripts for that. I think the plan is I'm going to do Eddie Kingston first. I think then I'm also going to do one on the Elite, one on Kenny Omega. Just things that will be important. I'll probably do one on MJF, but that one's going to take a while, just because he has so many storylines that are important to like get through, but we will see. But yeah, just planning on things like that. Ooh, do I have that dwarf scroll yet? I don't think I do. All right, let me eat this carp real quick, and then yum, 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 yum. All right, I am going to let my cat in, and then it should be around 3:30 by that point, and I will be ready to dive into what happened this past week. So give me 2 seconds, chat amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. All right, I am returned. So I will just wait for 3:30 for some people who may want to trickle in. Oh my gosh, can these monsters jump up off my dick? Please and thank you. Okay. I don't like that they're shaped like gems and they don't drop gems. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so we will obviously talk about Daniel Garcia. That's probably going to be our biggest subject today. But also some stuff with Roddy and Kyle, who kind of fold into the Daniel Garcia storyline. And we will talk about some of the cool stuff that the women are doing and some of the stuff that I wish the women would do or be allowed to do, etc., etc. But, that will come all in due time. Chop, 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 chop. Where is this stairwell? I need a stairwell in here, dude. Okay. So it's basically 3:30 now. And so, for anyone just jumping in, we are going to talk about the Collision and Dynamite that happened this past week. Collision that happened yesterday, although I do think it wasn't live. I believe it was pre-filmed, filmed on Thursday, which makes sense. So, first things first, Dynamite. Dynamite was insane, and I think we all know that, for a couple of reasons. So first things first on Dynamite, we saw Yuta still doing his thing with Chris Statlander, but there were some hints dropped that Chris's storyline is actually going to start taking off, which I'm very excited about. So Chris has sort of had this in-between storyline with the Death Riders for the past few weeks where, they insert themselves into her storyline every once in a while. Like, they'll come by and they'll help her out with something, and then they'll leave. And then they'll come by, help her out with something, leave. And I couldn't really figure out what it was. And so I started positing that I thought that Mox wasn't recruiting anymore. That this was more him just sort of going into the... Oh, shoot, we have seen the door scribbled before. Whatever. Going into these storylines as sort of a tertiary... This is an excuse for why this person's going to change and why they're going to go heel, etc., etc. And I said that after Mox wrestled Garcia the previous week, because that was my thought process, was, okay, Garcia's going to start getting a little more violent. He's going to start, changing up his match style. He's going to, do whatever. And of course, the moment I say that, the very next week, Dynamite ends the way that it does. But if we're just focusing on Chris for right now, I think it's very interesting what was said, where basically Harley was told, like, hey, we know who Chris's real friend is. And Chris, before that, had talked to Marina and said, our friend, you can tell him I don't need him, or I don't need, etc. So basically, it isn't going too far to say that the quote-unquote friend is Mox. And I think that's interesting for a couple of reasons, right? First reason is I can see Chris now joining the Death Riders because Garcia joined the Death Riders. And I think that's significant because Death Riders haven't had a fighting female in their faction yet. There's Marina, but Marina doesn't actually wrestle for whatever reason. It is mostly... She is there in a manager-esque role. I think if they bring Chris in, Chris would be a woman who is actually fighting on the Death Rider side. I also think it's interesting that they would hint that Chris is going to join the Death Riders because she and Harley have had such a good run in such a short time as a tag team. People absolutely love Chris and Harley, and if Chris turns on Harley, I mean, that would make sense. It would be a huge heel move and bring her into the Death Riders. But I would be disappointed to see that tag team break up because I love those two. I think those two are great. But I think there's significant evidence for Chris joining, not just because Garcia joined, and so there's precedence for, oh yes, I gotta bring him. I won't be able to sell him. I need to keep him for the thing. But I think it's significant because I've been trying to figure out why Chris hasn't joined Death Riders yet. And I think the reason is they're waiting for Orange Cassidy to come back. Because when you think about all the people who Jon Moxley recruits, other than, like Gabe Kidd and Pac and all of that, like with Yuta, Garcia, he recruited them and had them basically turn down their mentors. So what I think is going to end up happening is Matt Menard, Daddy Magic, is going to try and pull Garcia away from the Death Riders. I think he's going to try to intervene in some way, and Mox is going to have Garcia do what he made Yuta do, which is either bag his mentor or, do something to put him down. What is it? Why are you crying? My cat is crying. He's very upset with me because I fed him wet food, which he loves and was begging for. Anyway, so, that's what I think is going to happen with Garcia and Daddy Magic, because I think that is just sort of the way that the Death Riders do things. I think the reason that Chris hasn't joined yet is because they didn't have anyone who fit that criteria for her. They didn't have like a mentor or a close friend who's going to try and bring her back from the brink. And I think either they're setting up Harley being that person where Chris is going to have to burn that bridge behind her in order to join the Death Riders by turning on Harley, or the reason it hasn't happened yet is because they're waiting for Orange Cassidy to come back. And I think it could be argued that Orange Cassidy would then be the person who Chris will have to, send out to pasture, so it were, to join the Death Riders. I think either of those options, it being Harley or it being Orange, are equally likely, and I am equally excited to see both. Shoot, I didn't get that. Whatever. Anyway, so I think that, that would make sense for why they've had this Chris storyline drag on for so long in order to, make that impact. Give me 2 seconds. Binks now wants out of the room. But, yeah, so I think that, evidence is stacking up for this being a turn for Chris. And I think it would be, then, right, going off of that, because that's sort of like, that was sort of towards the beginning of the show is, it's Yuta bringing her in. It's Yuta, like, trying to convince her, like, hey, this is a good place for you, like, come and join. I think that's very interesting, because Chris and Yuta never had the best, like, relationship. They never really had they were never really close. Chris was one of the reasons Yuta left the best friends. So I just think it's very interesting them having it be Yuta bringing Chris in, and I wonder if it's because, and this is sort of me, theorizing, but Yuta knows that the Death Riders isn't actually all it's cracked up to be. He knows that they're not great. He knows that they're not serving him to make him a better wrestler, and he doesn't like Chris, so he would have no qualms about bringing her in, whereas with Daniel Garcia, there's a sense of mutual respect between the two of them. I think Yuta would have a much harder time bringing Garcia on for several reasons. So he's being distracted with Chris while Mox brings Garcia in. And we will get to Garcia just a little bit later. But yeah, so that whole thing is happening with Chris, and I think that is going to become very significant very soon with Chris joining the Death Riders. Because then, right, Mox isn't just recruiting anyone. Yes, he brought in Gabe Kidd, but that was more of like a one-off. He brought in Pac, but that's because Pac and Yuta did have like some sort of history. He brought in Marina because that was sort of his, person. But the two people who he has started recruiting lately are two people whose history is directly tied to Yuta. Like, Chris was one of the reasons Yuta left the best friends. Garcia was his, sort of number one. I think Regal said, like, his dragon to slay, his rival who sort of has followed him throughout his career. I think it's very interesting that Mox is choosing those two kinds of people for the Death Riders. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that I'll explain a little bit later. But later on in the show, right, so sort of getting off the Chris topic, later on in the show, we got a little more with Hangman Adam Page. And I'm very interested in his title run right now for a few reasons. I think the first reason being that this is an unusual title run for him, I think, because there isn't a storyline that's really sticking. He had the storyline with MJF, and I think that got stalled because MJF was getting married, etc. And then, he sort of quasi had a storyline with Mark Briscoe, and now he's got this storyline with Fletcher. it sort of feels all over the place a little bit, but all of the matches have been fantastic. I think like the MJF storyline is underpinning everything, but they had to give him something to do while MJF went and got married, and I think probably had nothing that's really hooked in the Hangman title reign just yet. And I think that they need a long-lasting story with him in order to define this storyline, which I'm hoping they have happen with MJF. Also, sorry if the stream is buffering a little bit. It looks like on my end, for some reason, even though it's showing me I have plenty in OBS, that there is some issue, and sometimes that happens because it just needs to work up or have been streaming for a little bit. So, apologies if it is a little slow, a little pixelated. I am hoping that it doesn't stay that way the whole time. Anyway, what was I saying? Hangman. I'm very interested in this storyline with him and Fletcher, though. I think Fletcher is one of those wrestlers who, and I've said it before, is so good. And he was up against something that has taken out a lot of wrestlers before, which is having left the superstar who made him in Will Ospreay. A lot of people do that and they don't really make it after that, this other person. But Kyle Fletcher is so good. He has like the visual factor. He's so good at wrestling. He's so good at character work. He's got this thing with Don Callis going that is like interesting to watch. It is just sort of, I don't know, man. It's good. I don't know how else to explain it. All right, give me 2 seconds. I am going to try and... Okay, yep, it looks like I have fixed that now. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, I think Hangman and Fletcher have such a unique dynamic between the two of them. I really wish that they had more time between each other. I wish that they had more... I don't know, man, because they did that promo the other week, and it was so good, just them basically ripping into each other. And I would love to see them have a longer storyline. I just don't know if we're gonna get that between, like, MJF trying to come back in and take the title and the fact that Kyle Fletcher has a title of his own. I really want Hangman and Fletcher to have a long feud. It just doesn't really seem like that's something that we're gonna get. I hope it is. I hope MJF sort of sticks with Mark Briscoe so that we get breathing room for Hangman and Fletcher. I just don't know if that... I don't know. I really don't know, because then MJF also has that looming threat of the contract. So we'll see how that works out. I just was very, like... watching him and Fletcher, there's the looming MJF, which makes me feel like we're not going to get a big Don Callis family Hangman feud, which we should, because Don Callis family is associated with the Bucks. Don Callis family just got rid of Kenny again. Like, there could be something big there with Hangman's storyline, and I feel like we are sort of missing a lot of that, unfortunately. Getting some fish so that I can afford to make a thing. Okay, don't need that right now. But yeah, that's sort of my perspective right now on the whole Hangman title reign right now. I just think it's a little odd that, what's happening is happening. I'm interested to see how it continues. I know it's going to be Hangman and Fletcher at All Out, which I think is going to be very, very good. I think those two can have some insane matches. It just doesn't really feel like Hangman's other title reigns, which have been sort of defined by strict storylines, like between him and Bryan Danielson and him and Mox and him and Swerve. Yeah, I just think it's very interesting. So we will see. We'll see what ends up happening with it. It just sort of feels a little all over the place, but, then again, maybe it just needs that one story to really sink its teeth into. Regardless, I think Hangman is doing incredibly as the champion. I think Hangman as champion is... oh, shoot. I can't put bait on this hook. Come on, dog. Anyway. That being said. Nope, I didn't want to fish over there. We're just trying to make some money so that I can get my axe upgraded. But yeah, so Hangman and Fletcher had their face-to-face, and that was very good. Again, I think Fletcher does fantastic with promos. I think Fletcher is so good at antagonizing anyone who's across the ring from him. Just because he's got that look, right? He's this guy who gets into the ring with all these flashy clothes, and he's an absolute unit. And him and Hangman play off of each other so well. It's so funny, like, how well they play off of each other, because they kind of know, like, okay, I can say this weird thing to you, like, you're gonna say my full name, or I'm gonna get in that, whatever. It just seems like they have fun, and that's when you get the best promos together. And so that was pretty good. And then, I do talk about the Death Rider storyline a lot. Mostly because it's very interesting to me, and also because the BCC was one of my favorite tag teams, I think, or factions, I guess, who's ever come out of AEW. And so it's very close to me. And so I just like chatting about it a lot. And I think we are finally getting some story progression when it comes to the Death Riders. Give me 1 second. But yeah, we're finally getting some story progression, it seems. Bring Jody a cauliflower. Luckily for you, ma'am, I do have a cauliflower that I will bring to you after I have fished my brains out in order to upgrade my axe. But yeah, so, all that is going on. And then we have Daniel Garcia. I will say, I was not expecting Daniel Garcia to turn that Wednesday night, mostly because, and I explained it sort of at the beginning, I expected Daniel Garcia to change his in-ring style more so than actually join the Death Riders, but he did join the Death Riders. And I think I and a lot of people online, the biggest thing that we took from that was how was Yuta going to react to it. And we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen how, Yuta is going to react to first of all, his biggest rival being recruited by Mox. Second of all, Yuta, it seemed like Mox was trying to distract him away from the times when Mox was wrestling Garcia or talking to Garcia one-on-one. Either Yuta wasn't brought out to ringside, or Yuta was distracted with that promo time in order for Mox to then go down and talk to Garcia. So I am wondering if we're going to get a Yuta crashout, which I really hope we're going to get. Because think about it from Yuta's perspective. We have this kid who, one of the biggest fractures that ever happened in BCC before William Regal left was Bryan going after Daniel Garcia and sort of completely ignoring Yuta and throwing him to the wolves. And listen, we will get into Bryan later. I have things to say about Bryan's role in this storyline. But Garcia being recruited was a very big sore spot for Yuta. And so now Mox is doing it. Mox being one of the people who was trying to tell Bryan beforehand, like, hey, you need to, pay more attention to Yuta. You chose him first. You wanted Garcia in BCC, but you chose Yuta first. You said his name first. So now Mox is bringing in Garcia, and it seems like he's doing that in a way where he doesn't really want Yuta to know that he's bringing in Garcia, which I think is probably going to play a role in things. Now, the other side of the equation is I also theorize that Yuta didn't want Garcia in the Death Riders because he knows that they aren't good for you. He is well aware of what they're doing to him. He's well aware of the impact that they are having on his life and on, his ability to perform in the ring. Oh, close that for whatever. And he sort of wanted to keep Garcia away from that. Now, looking at how Yuta has been handling Chris, do I think that that's the case anymore? I don't. I honestly think that they are distracting Yuta in order to bring in Garcia, but I don't think that Yuta is going to really care one way or the other if Garcia is hurt or if Garcia starts being treated like him. I think what we are going to see is either Yuta and Garcia teaming up in the Death Riders and both of them leaving together, or Garcia is going to take Yuta's spot. Mox is going to give Garcia more attention. Mox is going to give Garcia more opportunities. He's going to start ignoring Yuta, pushing Yuta off to the side. And then Yuta is going to grow this sort of resentment, and that inevitably is going to be what pushes Yuta out of Death Riders and brings Garcia into it. Garcia then becoming Mox's new, young boy. Which I think is going to break everyone's heart, because we've seen these two go back and forth, and, as tragic as it was watching Yuta have to adapt to the way that the Death Riders now treat him, it's going to probably hurt even more to see that in the end, Mox then did the one thing that hurt him, the one thing that Brian did that hurt him more than anything, which is replacing him with Garcia, which I think is what's going to end up happening. In addition to that, there are other characters at play here, because we've got Claudio, who I think is going to play a role in all of this, because we haven't really seen Claudio doing a whole lot other than teaming with Yuta, right? And there are two possibilities for how he is going to react to them recruiting Garcia, which is he's going to feel for Yuta, because Claudio was always more empathetic towards him. It's why Claudio was used to bring Yuta into the Death Riders. So I think if Mox starts pushing Yuta out, I think he loses Claudio too. I at least hope that that's what ends up happening. Fingers crossed that we get, if Yuta leaves Death Riders, Claudio goes with him. Because otherwise, you've just got Claudio kind of there, and Yuta's sort of floating out in the world. The other hand, there is Eddie Kingston, who is coming back, I believe. At the very least, he has a match against Big Bill at All Out. I think he comes back on Wednesday to start setting up the storyline and to make his big return, and everyone freaks out. At least I hope he shows back up on Wednesday, in person, not just cutting a visual promo, because I miss Eddie Kingston. It has been over a year since we've seen him. I don't want to have to wait until Saturday to actually see him, but what ends up happening is what's going to end up happening. I am just excited to see him now. So, it is what it is. So, yeah, so I think Eddie comes back. I think what's going to happen is Eddie comes back, faces Big Bill, and then gets pulled into the Death Riders storyline. I don't think he has a long-standing feud with Big Bill. I think it's just, here's his return match. Who does he want to have his return match against? Big Bill. I think they settle some things with the Death Riders, and then they slide Eddie into that storyline. I think that's what ends up happening. Now, I think Eddie is going to step into the Death Rider storyline, either being the person who's going to try and take down Mox and talk some sense into him, or being the person that Yuta goes to when he's either kicked out or leaves. Because Eddie Kingston doesn't like Yuta right now. They've had some, issues back and forth, but in the end, Eddie and Yuta have had a pretty good relationship in the past, so, it's a toss-up what Eddie's opinion on any of this is going to be. Oh no, I have to get rid of two things, because I really want these. Shoot. Alright, I don't think I'll get rid of one of these, and then the plain one of these. Let's get that, and then we will return home to empty out our inventory. But yeah, so I think that is the role that Eddie Kingston is going to come in and play. I think Eddie Kingston is going to show up. I think he has his return match. He beats Big Bill. He shows, hey, I'm back. Gets pulled into the Death Rider storyline because there's such a demand for it, and because it just makes sense that the next person to go after Mox when Kenny's out, Osprey's out, Swerve is out. Darby Allin is there, but I think Darby Allin and Eddie teaming up has happened in the past, and it would make sense if they team up now to take down Mox. Or not even to take him down, just to, make him sane again, which I think is what Eddie would likely come back to do. So, we will see. We'll see how that ends up happening. End of a new day. Okay. So, let's see here. What time are we at? We're making pretty good time. I'm chatting a lot. Okay, so we've discussed Garcia turning. I think, and we saw at the end of that episode, Daddy Magic being distraught. We saw Brian being distraught. And so I think that is another point in this whole storyline that is going to become significant, right? Because you've got Brian now seeing not just Yuta, but Garcia being taken in by Mox. And I think Garcia probably hurts double because here's this guy that Brian once tried to recruit and failed to. And he is going to see Garcia really get crushed under Mox's boot. He's going to see, what happened to Yuta now happened to Garcia. But there's some very interesting story beats with it too, right? Like, when you think about it, Brian really just sounded sad and disappointed that Garcia joined Mox. Whereas when Yuta joined, he was angry. He was offended. We hear him talking about Yuta now like, this is a betrayer. He sucks. I hate him. All of this. It's a lot of vitriol when it's Yuta. It's a lot of sadness and disappointment when it's Garcia. And I think that's just another example of how he has always sort of treated them differently. And in the end, why Yuta did choose Mox over Brian. Because from Yuta, Brian always demanded respect. Brian demanded more from him. He thought Yuta constantly failed him when it came to respecting him and idolizing him. And when it comes to Garcia, it just seems like it is different. He feels for Garcia differently. He cares about Garcia more. And it's just very interesting to see how his reactions to their turns are. And maybe it's because when Yuta turned, he turned by attacking Brian and basically retiring him. But, I personally think it's because Brian as a character never really cared about Yuta. He cared about what Yuta gave to him, which was idolization. And, this sort of reinforces the fact that Mox was actually right in that Brian was a shell of himself towards the end. Brian stopped caring about wrestling and he more cared about the fans. He more cared about the fame, he more cared about their reaction to him rather than actually being a wrestler and taking care of himself. Mox said, you're not you, I need to put you down. And I think if the only choice was between the two, Brian really didn't give Yuta a choice. Which is why it upsets me when we see Yuta in the ring, like how we saw him on Wednesday. You hear how Brian talks about him. You hear how Brian says, like, oh, I hate Wheeler Yuta. He's a betrayer. He's a traitor. He did this. He did that. Like, he can shove it up his ass. It's just so interesting to me that Brian really takes no ownership of pushing Yuta in the direction that he did. Because if everyone will remember, when Yuta made the decision that he made, it was following a match where he was reaching out for Bryan because he had really gotten his ass handed to him, protecting Bryan. Yuta fought most of the match. Yuta was down on the mat, couldn't get up, was just, completely beaten down, was reaching out for Bryan towards the end of the match, and Bryan wasn't looking at him. Bryan was doing the yes chant. He was focused on the crowd. He was focused on everyone, chanting his catchphrase at him, and Yuta's reaching out for him, and Bryan just ignores him. Bryan says nothing to him, and that, I think, affected Yuta so much that Yuta was like, oh, okay, like, my choice is between Mox, who's at least going to pay attention to me, and Bryan, who has not only left me, but has left himself. So, I think it is significant that Bryan is taking no ownership of his part in Yuta leaving, and now just sort of feels so bad for Garcia because he doesn't see that, these boys, these men get pushed towards Mox because Mox is preying on them and because they have nowhere else to turn. So that was Dynamite. Dynamite was very good. Only thing that disappointed me was I was hoping that Eddie would actually show up, which I think, it's probably, he's getting some things in order. Ooh, melon seeds. But yeah, I think he's just getting some things in order. So he didn't show up. We move on then to Collision. So Collision, we get a couple more interesting little things. Starting off, we get something interesting with the women's match. So Chris is there, with all the women, talking to each other in the parking garage. And Chris is like, none of this has anything to do with the Death Riders. None of this has anything to do with, Harley. This doesn't have anything to do with Yuta. I just want to go out there and I want to have a match, and I want the match to be good. And you can sort of see that no one really is buying what she's selling because everyone has started. Who needs this cauliflower, by the way? I think it's Jody. Okay. Up we go to Jody's house. But yeah, you can sort of see that no one's really buying her story, which I think is another indication that she is absolutely going to join the Death Riders. Either, where did the cat go? There it is. She's going to join the Death Riders, I think, for sure. And then you're going to have Yuta and two people who have hated him in the past in a faction that just sort of has been treating him like garbage. But I, first and foremost, loved the women's match. I thought it was great. I thought Tony on commentary is always so good. I would love Tony on commentary more often, although, obviously she's not a commentator, but anytime she's on commentary, it's incredible. Just, hearing the way that she's able to put women over while also, is this not Jody? Shit, that's Robin. Oh no, did I give my, oh God. Okay, we'll get it sorted. I think I've got another cauliflower still growing. It'll be fine. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, so you've got, Tony there who's, able to put women over while also insulting them in such a very nuanced way. I just think it's really interesting the way that she is able to navigate her feuds with people. It takes a lot of, awareness of what you're saying and how these dynamics are going to work, because you need to insult someone but not insult them too bad and insult them in a way that makes you also look insane. She's just so talented. Oh my goodness. Wow, look at all this. Okay, Gunther, I don't need rice shoots. I can't use bait right now, so we'll put that away. Let's go talk to Gunther then, I guess. But yeah, so, Tony is incredible. I'm very excited to see this. I believe it was a three-way. It's going to be a three-way between her. No, it's going to be a four-way between her, Chris, Jamie, and Tekla. I'm also not positive that I say Tekla's name correctly. because it's Thelka. So is it Thekla or is it Tekla? I think it's Tekla. I'm not 100% positive. So, we will see. But, yeah, basically, women's match was incredible. Just more hinting at the fact that Chris is going to join the Death Riders. What else happened on Collision? It was a very good Collision. Oh, we had Big Bill calling out Eddie. Again, Eddie doesn't show up. I feel like they are edging us with Eddie returning. I want him back so bad. It was so nice, though, to hear that big, huge crowd chanting, "We want Eddie," because, yeah, we do. Bring Eddie Kingston back, please. It's been over a year. We know he's ready to come back. We know he's prepared. We know that he is fully healed. Just please, even if he's not wrestling right away, give us an Eddie Kingston promo. Put him on the mic. I swear I cannot. It has been so long since we've seen Eddie Kingston in a ring. We got him cutting his promo on Bryan when Bryan was about to have his match. And, that was nice, but it wasn't actually getting Eddie Kingston back, which was really sad. But now we're going to get him back. And just to sort of put it into perspective, how long he's been gone, the last time we saw Eddie Kingston in a ring, Adam Cole was back. The Death Riders were not even close to being founded. I think it was Hangman was still champ, but no, Swerve was champ, maybe? It may have been Hangman as champ. I'm not totally sure. But, it's been 500 days, guys. It has been a very long time since we've seen Eddie. And I really, really, really need this guy back. But here's hoping we get him back on Wednesday. What do well-preserved cog. Don't really need that, actually. Oh man, the second I get this axe upgraded, I am also upgrading my inventory slots because, oh boy, it's annoying having to trade everything out. I think I need 5,000 gold in order to upgrade it, so we should be able to get that by tomorrow. In game time, we will see. But yeah, so Big Bill calls out Eddie. Again, I think Eddie is going to come back, fight Big Bill, and then get enveloped into the Death Riders storyline. So I think that is going to be very interesting to see what role Eddie plays and how it affects Yuta. I think whatever ends up happening at All Out, and here's the thing, shit always goes down at All Out. Whatever ends up happening at All Out, it is going to ring in whatever role Eddie is then going to play. Now, I have been tossing around the idea that, what if Eddie returns and turns heel and joins Death Riders? I don't think it would happen, right? But, what if? What if Eddie comes back and everyone's like, oh, Eddie is gonna, put Mox in his place, Eddie is gonna, save us from Death Riders, and he ends up joining them. I don't know. I just think that'd be pretty neat. It's just something that I haven't really considered. But I think it would be pretty cool. It would involve him teaming with Claudio, though, so, who really knows? But on the topic of the Death Riders, we then saw Daniel Garcia and Jon Moxley teaming up against Kyle O'Reilly and Roddy. Now, there's a couple storylines happening in there that I think are really interesting. And, taking a break from talking about the actual Death Riders, if we want to talk about, and I do, Roddy and Kyle, I think they're setting up for something pretty big there. So first off, right, obviously, something's happening with Hologram. Hologram is being hacked by someone. We don't know who, but someone. And personally, I think it's Roddy. I think Roddy is messing with Hologram in order to bring Kyle back to his side, right? And I've said that before. I think that is a well-trodden path that is what's happening Also, I was told that there was a frenzy in the mountains, and I don't see the frenzy. Where is it? Ah, right there. Perfect. Okay. Oh, shoot. Let me actually get onto that platform. But yeah, so I also noticed something really interesting, right? So obviously, Paragon and Daniel Garcia have history. Daniel Garcia went up against Adam Cole for his title and didn't end up working out, but, you know, those two groups were very close. Did it really just end? Stardew Valley is testing me today. Anyway, you know, so they have that history together, and Kyle ends up going to say, you know, Adam Cole called and he was so disappointed, and, you know, we're really sad or really disappointed about it. And Roddy says, I'm mad at you, Daniel Garcia, for upsetting my best friend. And I think it's very interesting that he said that, because Kyle then goes, yeah, you really upset me. And I'm not fully convinced that Roddy was talking about Kyle. I am more so convinced that Roddy was actually talking about Adam Cole, and Kyle is not his best friend. Which would track, you know, when you think about the history between all those men. I think Adam Cole is number one for both of them. But I think it's significant that Kyle thought it was him, because now here's this, like, Roddy is trying to pull Kyle away from the conglomeration. Roddy is probably the person who's messing with Hologram. And Roddy's saying, oh, you upset my best friend. And I think he was talking about Adam Cole and didn't correct Kyle O'Reilly. So I think at All Out, I actually don't know if Paragon has a match at All Out. I'll have to look that up. But if they do, I think we see Roddy doing something. Either turning Hologram on Kyle O'Reilly, or we see Roddy turning, like, himself turning on Kyle. And then possibly, I don't think Adam Cole coming back, but maybe Adam Cole coming back in some sort of way, shape, or fashion. You know, I don't want to say Adam Cole coming back as a manager, because I know there's history there where WWE basically said, you know, you can stay on, but as a manager, like, we're not going to put you on the main roster for a few reasons. I think, namely, one of them was because Adam Cole really, you know, has suffered some career-ending injuries. But, you know, for the most part, I think it was, you know, just them making a creative decision. And I know Adam Cole just really wants to wrestle, and I know he was ready to retire when he got his latest concussion, but I think he can probably still go. It's a matter of if he thinks he can still go and still be. So, you know, it is what it is. We will see what ends up happening there. But, you know, I think Roddy is planning something. I think Roddy is planning for Kyle whatever he was planning for Adam Cole. So, you know, we'll see about that. We'll see what ends up happening there. Oh gosh, it's getting late. Okay. Come on. Let me be able to upgrade my axe. Also, sorry the stream is so choppy today. I don't know what's going on with it today. Usually it's a little bit better than this. Not totally sure what's up. Oh my gosh, it's a little fairy. Yay. But yeah, that leads nicely into the Jon Moxley and Daniel Garcia match, wherein we saw Garcia wound up getting the pin. And, you know, I think that's very good. I think that's good for his confidence. I think that's good for his character. However, I think it is spelling... It's what really convinced me that I think Mox is going to replace Yuta. And now I'm not fully convinced, but I'm thinking he probably replaces Yuta with Daniel Garcia, because Garcia's winning. Yuta is not. Now, Mox and Claudio are also losing, but I don't think Mox will be seeing things that way. I think Mox is going to see it as Yuta's supposed to win. He's not. I'm going to replace him with someone. And Yuta sort of being caught unawares of being replaced, and he is then going to be tossed out with no one and nothing to defend him. All right, let's go find Jody. Jody, and then upgrade my axe. But, so, you know, Mox and Garcia, they have their match, right, against Roddy and Kyle. Garcia ends up getting the pin, and, you know, from that, we see, and by the way, Darby Allin didn't show up this past week. I think it was sort of written off that he didn't show up because of what Garcia did to him, where he basically smashed his head into that chair, and therefore, you know, obviously, Darby was not there. He was busy recovering, and that also gave them time to build up Garcia's storyline. But following the match, Daddy Magic gets up and he starts yelling at Garcia, saying like, "What is this, huh? Like, what is this? Think of your mom. What's going on here? What is any of this?" And, you know, you can see Garcia just ignoring him, not talking to him, not looking at him. And I think there are a couple elements at play for that match. First of all, with Daddy Magic, I think Garcia is going to end up having to, like, bag him or, you know, do something else to put him out. Because that's just what Mox does. He's like, you can't have anyone or anything that you care about. You can't have anyone or anything that might be more important than me, anything that might make you weak. And it, like, Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta are parallels of each other. Their careers have always gone in parallel with each other. But like, not in the sense that they are the same, but in the sense that similar things happen to them, but they make opposing choices. So, what I think is probably going to happen is Daniel Garcia ends up putting the bag over Daddy Magic's head, or does something equivalent in order to push him away and join the Death Riders. Or, I think he ends up staying true to his character, which is he almost joins, but in the end refuses to take that final step and, you know, does the opposite of what Yuta does. I think he and Yuta, being perfect foils of each other, is going to continue, and he is not going to put the bag over Daddy Magic's head. I think he's going to refuse to do that, not end up fully joining the Death Riders. This isn't Jody's house. Hold on. This is Jody's house. And I think that would be very interesting, because then we could see Yuta being like, holy shit, like, you can make other choices. This doesn't have to be like my life. I could have chosen to save Brian and I didn't, and, you know, any series of guilt, whatever. But I think it would also be very interesting for Garcia's character to make that choice. Now, do I think that that's more likely to happen? No, because then where does Garcia go after that? I'm not totally sure. Maybe, you know, Garcia makes that choice and Yuta ends up teaming with him and they both try and take down Death Riders. I think that would be really compelling. But, you know, who's to say what ends up actually happening? I don't know. I think any number of these things are equally likely to happen. Now, another thing that I think is interesting is we know Yuta was there in the arena at that show because earlier in the night he showed up at Chris's match, which was very funny. He was like on the ring with all the women and they were like, "Get out of here, what are you doing?" And personally, I think, like, just let Yuta be girly pop. Like, let him show up, let him be in the women's matches. Like, if Yuta leaves Death Riders and then gets adopted by an all-women faction, nothing would make me happier. I think that would be great. Just let him find some things out about himself. But we know he was there, but Yuta didn't come out ringside with Mox and Marina. Yuta was left in the back. And I think that has to be a purposeful choice, because they are not showing us Yuta's reaction to Daniel joining the Death Riders. Mox is distancing Yuta from himself and from Daniel. I don't know why. Maybe it's going to end up being nothing. I would like for it to end in, this just being an absolute crash out for Yuta. I think that would be very funny, personally. But, we will have to wait and see what ends up happening with that. I'm not sure. Give me the fishies. Fishy time. Fishy time. But yeah, so that is how Collision ended, was Garcia sort of shoving off Matt Menard and walking into the back with the Death Riders. Now, this upcoming Saturday is going to be All Out. It's going to be at a very early time, so there's a chance I'm able to stream that day. I don't know, though. If I do, I will jump on directly after the show ends, but I think it's going to start at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I think it'll probably go to like 7 or 8, and maybe I stream that day, or I try and stream Sunday. But I want to get in a stream after this upcoming Dynamite. I don't think I'll be able to. I would like to, don't think I will. But, again, not making any promises one way or the other about what I end up being able or not being able to do. But I have some predictions of what I think is going to happen based on the current card, which I will pull up here in a second. I just want to catch a fish real quick. I was also talking about earlier, for anyone who missed it, making another edited video. It's been, I think, about a year since the last time I did that. And it would be doing a series basically where I explain here are the things that you need to know if you're just getting into AEW, because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to get into wrestling, I want to get into AEW, but I don't know where to start. And it's like, okay, well, here's some of the important players, here's their storylines, here's some other major storylines, here's like a general knowledge of what you should know in order to be caught up. So the first one I have a script ready for. I just need to find time to film and edit it, which probably won't come out anytime super soon. But those sort of things are in the works. I have one script ready. I'm planning on another couple. I know what people I want to do. I just, have the time to actually get it done just yet. But I'm hoping that changes very soon. All right, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to pull up the All Out card as it stands right now, and we are going to make some predictions. And yeah, so just give me 1 second. Okay, so as things stand right now, there are a few storylines. Not every match has been announced. Usually, especially for some reason for bigger pay-per-views like this, they don't actually announce what the matches are going to be until about the week before. So, we are... so right now we've got, obviously, the Daniel Garcia storyline. I honestly have no idea what's going to happen with that at All Out. I think either he attacks Matt Menard this upcoming Wednesday, or if he doesn't, it happens at All Out. Darby Allin is going to be there. I'm not sure what happens with his match with Moxley. I think literally anything could happen. I think someone could come out and interfere. I think Yuta could turn. I think literally there is no telling what ends up happening with those guys. But that literally the only prediction is I have no idea what happens. I think probably Darby Allin beats Jon Moxley simply because Mox has been on a losing streak, and I think that's a very interesting part of his current character. Also going on is FTR versus Cope and Christian. Now, this storyline has sort of fizzled the past couple of weeks because for some reason, and maybe it's because they just don't have time, but it's just been FTR talking. We haven't really seen a lot of Cope and Christian coming in and, doing anything significant. But that is going to happen. I think what ends up happening is Cope and Christian end up winning, or because we have yet to see Jack Perry come back, and we have yet to see Luchasaurus, make any sort of move with the matriarchy. I think what could happen is Christian and Cage, no, Christian and Cope lose by interference by Jack and Luchasaurus. Oh, come on, I'm out of energy. Barely got into the mines. But I think that is very to happen is Jack coming back and going straight for Christian, and Cope sort of being collateral damage because he is currently aligned with Christian. But I do think All Out, we see Jack Perry come back. That is one of my biggest predictions is I think Jack Perry absolutely makes a return at All Out, very likely during the FTR versus Cope and Christian match. Then we also have Hurt Syndicate in sort of a weird storyline with Ricochet. I think it's interesting, I think it is what it is. I think Ricochet is a lot more interesting than the Hurt Syndicate. I think the most interesting that the Hurt Syndicate was when they were having their storyline with MJF, which had sort of a weirdly anticlimactic ending. So I'm not sure what happens there. I think Ricochet probably loses, but we'll see. I'm not super invested in it. I don't think a lot of people are very invested in it, so we'll see what ends up happening. Also, we've got MJF versus Mark Briscoe in what, the funniest match I've ever heard of, which is a TNT match, which not, thank God, the exploding barbed wire cage match. I think AEW learned its lesson following the disastrous first implementation of that. I highly doubt they'll ever do that kind of match again. Or if they do, here's hoping they have some sort of expert dealing with the pyrotechnics. For those of you who don't know, AEW, way back when, Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega were having a really big feud. They were fighting for the AEW Men's Championship, and their match sort of culminated in an exploding barbed wire match. And the quote-unquote exploding barbed wire didn't actually end up happening. There was some sort of glitch with the pyrotechnics. It more of just went poof, there was a poof of smoke, and the ring sort of collapsed a little bit. It was a very anticlimactic, so, it is what it is. So I don't think that'll happen again. But I was like, oh, maybe that's what the TNT match is. No. TNT match is tables and thumbtacks, which I think is hilarious. I love that concept. Just having a bunch of tables there, a bunch of thumbtacks. I guarantee you we'll have a table with thumbtacks glued to it. I guarantee you it's going to just go absolutely insane. I think MJF and Mark Briscoe, it's sort of a weird storyline, but I think it's very fun. And I want to see MJF doing more fun things. I know that's not really his character right now. His character is more slowly coming unglued, but, we'll end up seeing what happens. Let's see, what else? FTR, MJF. Oh, yes, so then we see, we are going to have a women's match. It's going to be Tony. It is going to be Jamie Hayter, Chris Statlander, and Thekla. Honestly, I hope Tony retains. I just don't actually know if she's going to. I think there is a very likely chance that Jamie Hayter ends up winning or Chris Statlander ends up winning. And if Chris Statlander wins, I think the likelihood of her joining the Death Riders is actually very low, because she will have been like, oh, well, I don't need the Death Riders. I won this title all on my own. I can stand on my own. If she loses, I think very similar to Yuta, very similar to Garcia, that loss will drive her towards Death Riders. Jamie Hayter, I also think, can win. But, it's not that I don't want Jamie Hayter to have gold, it's that I prefer Tony. So I think it's very likely that Jamie Hayter walks out with the title. I hope it's Toni Storm. Just my personal opinion. We also have, I believe Mercedes is going to go up against Riho. Out of that, I think Mercedes ends up winning. Mercedes is one of the most protected wrestlers in AEW right now, and I'm not disappointed with that more so that I'm disappointed with how all of her matches end. Like, I don't want this to be another match that ends in a roll-up and she runs away and then, she looks like a weak champion, her opponent looks like a weak competitor. I just want something interesting to happen. And I would actually really like if this starts like a decline where she starts to lose her belt and like has her own sort of crash out. I think that would be really interesting. I think it would add something to her character, and everyone loves Riho. So, it would just be really nice if Riho ends up coming out victorious. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't. I just hope it does. Yeah, but other than that, I actually don't think anything else has been announced yet. Well, okay, obviously there's also Hangman and Kyle Fletcher, which is going to be, I think, just a very good match. I don't see anything. I don't see an upset happening. I think Hangman ends up retaining, but I think he like puts Fletcher over extremely well. I think Fletcher, comes out of it looking like $1 million because he is just a phenomenal wrestler, and him and Hangman together is a really, really unexpectedly good combination. Now, that being said, I think what else ends up happening with the Don Callis family is we have Konosuke Takeshita and Okada going at each other. I think I actually can't remember if they have a match. Oh no, it's gonna be that they just had a tournament, so it's gonna be Konosuke, Okada, and whoever wins from the next round of the bracket match. And I can't remember who's there. Oh, it's Dorada and it's going to be Dorada and Beast Mortos, I think. So whoever wins out of that, it's going to be them versus Konosuke versus Okada, which I think is going to end up creating a splinter in the Don Callis family, because have long since had this sort of stewing rivalry, which I am very excited to see grow into something more. I think those two can put on an insane match together. I think Konosuke is good enough to hang with guys like that. I'm just excited to see them like really get like the meat of a feud going on. But yeah, so I think they end up feuding. I think either Okada wins or Konosuke wins, and that encourages Okada to actually, continue a feud with Takeshita to prove like, no, I'm actually better than this guy. Me losing this match was a fluke. I think either one of those two things ends up happening. I don't think anything has been announced yet for Paragon, but I can see them getting into, because I think it's Jon Moxley versus Roddy next week on Dynamite. I can see Roddy and Roddy and Kyle O'Reilly going up against some form of the Death Riders, probably against Danny and maybe Claudio, which I think would break a lot of people's hearts because Claudio has only ever teamed with either Yuta or Mox. Or I think it could get even more interesting and have it be Garcia and Yuta teaming up to take on versions of Paragon, being Kyle O'Reilly and Roddy. And then likely Roddy ends up turning on Kyle, Hologram ends up turning, something along those lines ends up happening. But I think that's how they will probably be roped into All Out that way. And I think a lot of this is going to get set up when Dynamite comes around. Because, and also for anyone who didn't know, Dynamite this week is going to be 3 hours long. So I think we are going to get a lot more matches being set up for All Out, a lot more storylines being cemented, and maybe possibly some progression. We don't actually usually get a ton of storyline progression right before a pay-per-view. That kind of stuff usually happens at the pay-per-view. However, I think with Dynamite being 3 hours long, it wouldn't make sense to have that extra hour and not use it to do something. Now, the last bit of... Wait, let me give this chick back her... Here's your axe. You're welcome. My last bit of prediction is who I think is going to return. So we have 3 people who I think are returning either on Dynamite this week or at All... What was I saying? Sorry, the thing is buffering for some reason. Stop buffering, please. It's telling me I have excellent connection, and it's buffering. Why? There we go. Sorry about that. But I think... So what I was saying was, I'm hoping he comes back to be in-ring on Wednesday. I think we're more likely to get a taped promo. Then I think Orange Cassidy returns at All Out, because there isn't really anywhere for him to fit into a storyline returning this upcoming Wednesday. But I do think he returns at All Out. I think he probably returns... Oh, actually, you know what? I can see it being that Roddy turns on Kyle during their match, or after their match, probably after, you know, whatever combination of the Death Riders defeats them. He turns on Kyle. Orange Cassidy returns to, you know, be in Kyle's corner. And that then kicks off a whole feud between Conglomeration with Kyle O'Reilly and formerly Paragon, which is just Roddy. I think that would be really cool. I think that's how... That I am making a prediction that is how Orange Cassidy comes back. Then I think the last return that we have is Jack Perry, and that is all but confirmed. I am positive Jack Perry is coming back. We saw, if you don't keep up with the BTE YouTube channel, he called the Young Bucks, and, you know, they ignored him. And then they have another episode coming out on Monday that will probably give us more context as to what's going to end up happening. But I think that would be very cool. I think Jack returns. I think Jack doesn't return to do anything with the Young Bucks. I think Jack returns and instead has Luchasaurus in his corner. And he probably returns to go up against the Matriarchy. Now, and I'm sure I must be wrong, but I can't for the life of me remember if the Young Bucks actually have anyone who they're going to fight against this upcoming All Out, because the last we saw them, they were with Death Riders, but I don't think they actually, like, have any feud going on with anyone. They just went in... actually, maybe it could be that they're going to end up feuding with Top Flight. My Steel Axe is ready. Guys, we're going into the Forbidden Forest today. Anyway, I think Young Bucks could probably, and it'll probably be set up this Wednesday, they could probably go up against Jet Speed. I think that would be really interesting, because I believe they won the money after defeating them in a match where one of the Bucks pinned Kevin Knight. So that's very likely that they end up facing each other at All Out. I think that would actually be a fantastic match, because they have very similar wrestling styles, where it's sort of a combination of lucha libre, sort of a combination of also martial arts, but it's also very showy, very, you know, flamboyant. I think it'd be pretty cool. I think they would have just a good match in general. But I am interested to see what, like, they end up doing with the Young Bucks storyline, because, like, don't get me wrong, I really am enjoying this whole, like, pitiful, broke, like, Young Bucks getting bullied by production storyline, but I'm very interested to see what ends up happening with it and what they end up doing together. I think, you know, at some point they're going to have to redeem themselves, or just, like, sink further and further into being evil. For a period of time, I thought they were going to rope them back into Hangman storyline, but it doesn't actually really look like that's going to happen anytime soon. Though I really hoped that it would. So we'll see. I think we get more storyline progression with them. One, I think they're going to cement their whatever match they're going to have at All Out this upcoming Wednesday. And then I think we get a little hint of what they're going to do next at All Out, either with Kenny Omega coming back or with them starting a longer feud with Jet Speed. So we're just waiting on the axe to, well, this fucking place to open up. But those are all the predictions that I have right now. I think we're at a really interesting place where we could see the Death Riders storyline progressing and Yuta finally having something more to do with it. I think we can see something coming with Eddie Kingston showing up, and he will probably have some sort of something with the Death Rider storyline. I think we're going to see Garcia either turn on Matt Menard or not turn on him, and that'll affect the Death Rider storyline. We're poised for a lot to happen. But, you know, as it stands right now, you know, literally anything could happen. There are 1,000 different things that could end up happening with that storyline, and I'm not really sure how any of them are going to go. But I've been promising for a couple of weeks that we would add Forest, and now we are going to. Let's get that done, and I think that is probably how I will end this off. I'm probably going to end the stream instead of actually ending the day. I'll then finish up the day and pick back up again. I think I'm going to try to stream at like the day of the pay-per-view because it's going to start so early. I would be able to stream then at like 7 or 8, like right as it finishes up. Or if I'm not able to do that, then I will stream that following Sunday. Just to sort of discuss whatever ends up happening. And I just think that'd be very, very fun. And we're in this little forest. Guys, we finally made it. It's only been several weeks of me streaming, promising that I was going to actually get us here. And look, I actually got us here. Oh, this place is awesome. Okay, and I think from the preview that I got of the Cryptids pack, that this area is one of the areas where we can run into one of the cryptids. I'm not sure if it's the cryptid that I saw, so I won't mention it, or if it's randomized, but, you know, I'm hoping that mod pack starts to show up more in-game. I'm guessing I probably have to be here when it's dark. So actually, you know what, maybe I do round out this day on stream so that I don't run into a cryptid off stream and then, you know, basically ruin the whole reason why I had us come here. So let's kill this guy. Stop it. Stop misbehaving. Maybe I actually end the day early because I do have to jump off and get some things done. But again, like I said, I'm going to try and stream either Saturday following the pay-per-view or Sunday. Very, again, unlikely I'll be able to stream during the weekday as I am still working through my new job, but, you know, we shall see. We shall see. But let's wrap up this day. I really hope All Out turns out well. I think it's going to. All Out is, I feel like AEW's usually their biggest pay-per-view. All Out is when the craziest shit happens, and then I think Full Gear is where their most high-stakes matches are. So we'll see what ends up happening this year. I was a little underwhelmed by Forbidden Door, and maybe that's my fault. Maybe my expectations of it were too high, and, you know, I forgot that it is sort of a dream match pay-per-view as opposed to an actual, you know, storyline progression pay-per-view. But I'm sure All Out is going to make up for that just because there's so much in the chamber for all these storylines coming up. But with that, I will end off the stream here. I hope to see you guys on Saturday or Sunday. I will have the stream pre-scheduled, but I may have to move it back a day depending on how late the actual pay-per-view goes and what things look like next weekend. But until then, I hope everyone has a great week. Make sure that you catch Dynamite this week. Again, it's going to be 3 hours, so plan for that. And until then, have a safe week. Goodbye. I love you. End stream.